have to start with the smaller grants before you get to that level. So make sure that you look at everybody and try to get that long trip started with a single step of a small grant. Inside the CREST program, we're going to have the postdoctoral research program. Yes, it's a new name. We have Regina here, who's in charge of that program. Make sure to ask her about it. There's new changes that will allow more people to apply, and you should be able to benefit from those changes. We also have programs that will do institutional change, which are the HBCU Rise. The solicitation should be out before the end of the month. And then we also have the CREST centers, which will provide funding for multiple sub-projects and develop a center that can last up to 10 years.
For HBCU-UP, our funding mechanisms are really informed by the institutional change agents that we identify. And so broadly speaking, our funding opportunities are available via tracks in the current HBCU-UP solicitation, where we have two, the Broadening Participation Research in STEM Education and Research Initiation Awards that are squarely focused on developing faculty research capacity. So this is your own independent research program where you're looking to hone the institutional context where you're currently serving to be able to support your individual endeavors. For institutional change, there are 3 tracks currently: the Targeted Infusion Projects, Implementation Projects, and then Achieving Competitive Excellence Implementation, or ACE. Each of these are available and they are scaled such that the Targeted Infusion Projects are typically at the departmental level. So if you are a faculty member or a department chair and you're looking to make updates to the STEM education curriculum where you find yourself, the Targeted Infusion Projects are short-term, up to 3 years, that allow you to identify, again, at the department level, any aspects of STEM education that you think you might want to target and improve for the benefit of your institutions. The range and disciplines that can be addressed fall and really run the gamut of the National Science Foundation's collective interest. And so I want to underscore that at the NSF, for all of the funding opportunities that we're sharing with you, STEM, as we know, is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But I am really excited that this National Science Foundation identifies social, behavioral, and economic sciences as an opportunity to advance and inform that lens. And so wherever you might be positioned in terms of your faculty interests, but also your curricular interests, we invite you to consider those funding opportunities. And then our newest track in the HBCU-UP program is the Broadening Participation Research Centers. This track is really designed for those institutions involved to make a national impact, to grow in terms of developing, creating, implementing, designing, and disseminating scholarly material that informs broadening participation. We are clear that members of the HBCU community are implementing strategies that have been very transformative and has informed your success in being responsible for producing most, or a good majority, about 25% of all bachelor's degrees conferred on Black Americans in this country. And so how you do that, persons are interested in knowing what that is. And so we invite you to scale your interests so that you can start to share your narrative and, of course, engage in others as a part of doing so. So that's, again, a summary of the centers. They are collaborative projects, and we currently have 2 fully funded centers, one out of the University of the Virgin Islands, CASTLE, or the Center for the Advancement of STEM Leadership, and the other is housed at Morehouse College, which is STEM-US, or the center that's investigating the undergraduate student experience in STEM. And so those 2 centers are really helping to inform and generate evidence and produce new scholarly materials to really address how HBCUs across this STEM ecosystem and landscape are uniquely positioned to add to that narrative.
So when you're developing that plan, first thing that you need to do is look at what goals you want to establish. My mic? Once again, do you want to be externally funded investigator? Do you want to be externally funded teaching institution? Do you want to be a research institution? What outcomes do you want to achieve? Do you want to be advancing your individual research portfolio? Do you want to strengthen the STEM education at the institution? Do you want to develop STEM research and develop developmental activities at the institution? Depending on what you want to do are the different directors that you're going to target and the different funding opportunities. What are going to be the individuals that are going to move that agenda? The STEM faculty, the department or the school, or the university administration? As you know, the more complicated the change, the higher the level that you're going to have to achieve and get some buy-in from. If you want to send an individual research grant, you send it in your lab, you write it, you send it out. If you want to change how the institution works, you're going to have to get buy-in from the other faculty members, department chairs, vice presidents, et cetera, What is the timeline? Usually a single project PI can be 3 years, 5 years. The getting an externally funded teaching institution, the grants will be around 5 years. And the research grants are usually around 5 years for the centers. So what can you accomplish in that reasonable amount of time? And what are you going to do when year 4 comes around and you need to start thinking about renewals and what you're going to do next? So I always said to everybody, the moment that you submit that grant, start thinking about that renewal, because those 3-4 years are going to by very quickly.
If I could just make one note about that plan, and Luis definitely touched on it at the end, is that for some of these goals, you might have multiple of them, right? There may not be, one isolated goal. They could be for you individually, but a university might have a broader agenda that identifies all of these goals and or others, right? So these are just examples that are offered to you to kind of get you to reflect on kind of how you are positioned at your institution and what goals does your institution have from a STEM research and education lens. And so this plan is summative and it's iterative. So it's not going to be one project that's going to help you meet your goal. Maybe, right? Especially if you're just focused on your faculty work for a certain defined period of time. But really, in order to achieve that institutional change, that institutional capacity building, it's going to be a good amount of these awards, but it's going to be continuing that process over and over and over and over again. And so we'll take questions at the end, but I just wanted to make sure that we underscored that point, because you might come into this space thinking about your work, but your work is situated in a unique department, school, and university that might have broader interests. And so how you see yourself and your work within that larger narrative is really, really important. And so in the next series of slides, what we'd like to do is at least share with you that under the scope of these 3 goals, how our respective programs might be utilized to help you reach some of these goals. So if you have a desire to, of course, be this externally funded investigator, and you're looking for resources to help fund your personal research agenda, we'd like to offer to you that HBCU-UP as a program, as I mentioned under the faculty research interests, has the Research Initiation Awards and the Broadening Participation Research Awards in STEM. And these 2 together represent an opportunity to provide faculty, STEM faculty members with specific discipline-specific expertise, right? It gives them support for their individually focused goals. It also allows them to engage students in the process. There's also an opportunity to identify graduate students that might be involved or postdocs that might be necessary. The scope and scale will vary based on project. But if you are an individual in the room and you're trying to figure out for your colleagues that may not be here, we know that you're funded. And so for your colleagues that might be here, or if you are looking to shift trajectory in terms of where your current funding is, and you have a goal of being externally funded and driving your own research program, we offer HBCU-UP as a great place to start with these two funding mechanisms.
And in the case of the CREST centers, if you're an individual researcher and you want to get involved in and develop a project, the way to do it will be through a sub-project in that center. Now, the idea is that that sub-project will come together with other sub-projects to create a cluster and to stimulate the institution to develop that cluster mentality, to do cluster hires and develop collaborations. So for the CREST centers, although one sub-project could be in biology, the other one could be in chemistry, as long as they're working together. So you could have multiple disciplines as long as they're looking at one single problem through different lenses and coming together to develop a single product.
So if, for example, then your goal beyond the individual focus is just to ground your teaching institution, we understand that not every university has aspirations to be research intensive. But if your teaching institution is seeking to be grounded and supported with its external funding to accomplish your respective goals, HBCU-UP, through the targeted infusion projects, implementation projects, and the ACE implementation projects, are uniquely designed to encourage every institution to identify its own goals where they're looking to grow. Particularly, those measures might be in the form of student achievement. Again, I mentioned it might be in curriculum development. It might be in establishing a focus across disciplines, as Luis was just referring to integrate your curriculum such that it's far more interdisciplinary, however you may imagine. It might be integrating course-based undergraduate research experiences. They really can run the gamut, and it's all about, if you're at this moment, considering how does your institution define its STEM education and research priorities? Whether you're at the department level, school level, the TIP or the targeted infusion is more smaller scale for the department level, whereas the implementation and the ACE awards are more institution or school-based, however your university is organized. But we invite you to consider those funding mechanisms as you identify and pursue your university goals.
And if you are a teaching institution, how you might be asking yourself, how can I take advantage of the CREST program? So the CREST program, one of the things that they're required to do is to collaborate. And one of the ways to collaborate is establishing collaborations with undergraduate institutions. Another way to do that is through what we call the partnership supplement. So through those two different mechanisms, you can collaborate with the CREST Center so that your undergraduate students have access to research experiences that we're always looking for. And who knows, maybe that undergraduate student will like it so much that they will stay at the CREST Center as a graduate student. So being associated with CREST Center can provide you access to those undergraduate research experiences that we want to integrate into our curriculum.
And of course, noting that those collaborations can be at different universities, so it can really broaden your network. And then, of course, the final example that we're offering is if your institution happens to have aspirations to be research intensive or be defined as this research institution, we understand that that's likely going to constitute all of the examples that we've just gone over. So your institution is going to have faculty that's developing their research programs. It's going to have schools and departments, collaborations across institutions, engagement with other funding. So all of that is likely happening already. And then maybe your institution is asking, well, how do we strategically position ourselves such that we lead, right? As opposed to be the beneficiaries of engagement, how do we lead? Well, in the HBCU-UP program, we see the ACE implementation and the Broadening Participation Research Centers as that leading opportunity. It is an expectation of the program that proposals that are awarded through these particular funding tracks really disseminate their efforts to transition those institutions from being designing efforts that are internally focused to considering how the external community can really learn and benefit from the work that they're engaged in. And so while broadly this award can strengthen the institution's intellectual and research capacity, we understand that by virtue of doing that, that can be a resource for the national STEM ecosystem to leverage for the community's benefit.
So when it comes to the CREST program, if you're an HBCU that has a PhD program, you should definitely apply for the HBCU Rise. It will give you funds to further develop the academic capacity of the institution to produce more PhD students and expand your research infrastructure. After you have that grant, or while you have that grant, because you can apply for the CREST program while you have an HBCU Rise, you can come in for a CREST application which will provide 5 years of funding, $5 million to establish that research center. And that research center cannot stand on its own. It will have to be supported by the PhD program that you help establish or fortify to the HBCU Rise. So as you can see, they are linked with one another, because without those PhD students, you're not going to be able to produce that amount of research productivity that you're going to be able to need to be able to be successful as a research-intensive institution. So see these two programs as linked and supporting one another.
Thanks, Luis. And so beyond our respective programs, as I mentioned at the outset, there are additional funding opportunities that you can take advantage of right now as existing PIs, and also extend this conversation broadly to your colleagues at your home institutions. I'm not sure if you've covered this in the CREST business meeting or in the postdoctoral fellow business meeting, but in the HBCU-UP business meeting, we identified a resource for all investigators in Chapter 2 of the PAP-G as additional funding opportunities. So as you engage today, and as you learn more about CREST, if you're in HBCU-UP and or CREST, you learn more about HBCU-UP and you start building these networks and try to figure out what's actually possible, there are funding opportunities in the PAP-G that currently don't have deadlines. So we invite you to start to ideate around potential conference or workshop proposals that you can submit as soon as you design what it is that you're looking for our consideration. Planning proposals might be available to you. We understand that the time investment that's necessary to continue the conversation beyond today may take some resources to help you formalize really what it is that you're after. And so planning proposals are something that you might want to consider. Equipment proposals. These are resources that are available for you to identify what equipment might be beneficial for your university to position you to engage in research in a different way. And so, of course, we talked about at length supplements. But just already, these funding resources, they exist for you, and we want to make sure that our respective PI communities are aware of them, such that you might be able to secure additional resources to help extend your current efforts or engage in new areas. And so again, we focused on HBCU-UP and CREST, but in our division as well as our directorate, There are underfunding mechanisms for you to consider, and we have a representative from the Includes Initiative that's here. She's actually the current virtual experience coordinator. Her name is Tori Smith, but she will be on a panel tomorrow, as well as available during the rapid meeting session. So definitely feel free to engage with her if that's of interest. So everything that's bolded up here identifies persons who we currently know will be active as part of this meeting, whether they're presenting as a facilitator in a given session or if they'll be present at the rapid session meetings, which will be at 2 p.m. On the last day. Another point of note is that for the PAP-G, specifically the Chapter 2 funding opportunities, we will later this afternoon have a session from our colleague Stephanie Yee, who will be talking about engagement and processing things as through research.gov. So you may have questions about, I know what the solicitation tells me to do when I'm seeking funding for your respective programs, but how exactly do I respond to the PAP-G ones? If you attend her session, we believe that she'll be able to address some of those questions or at least highlight some of the processes that are in place for you to do so. Oh.
No. I just want to remind everybody to don't forget about the major research instrumentation program. You can be a community college, you can be a four-year institution, you can be a PhD institution, and apply for that program. The new solicitation just came out. So if you're looking for a way to buy new equipment that you need, make sure you look at the major research instrumentation program. So remember that there's funds outside of NSF, and that those funds outside of NSF can be beneficial to you and can integrate themselves into what you're trying to accomplish in many different ways. So during the meeting, you're going to have the opportunity to interact with program officers from NASA, NIH, DOD, Department of State, Peace Corps, National Endowment of the Arts, National Small Business Administration, Department of Commerce. So ask them about their programs, see how that they can be integrated into your plan, and see how they can come together so you can achieve your goal.
So you've heard from us, and so you might be wondering, well, what could potentially be your next steps? What we'd like to offer is, if you start at the top, we encourage you to inform your university administrators about your goals or engage with them to understand the goals that you may not be aware of. Having a sound understanding of your institutional context and the goals that are established in the realm of STEM education and research is keenly important, and it also helps inform your success. So for the postdoctoral fellows who are looking to transition into faculty appointments, these are the types of questions in terms of understanding the institution's research capacity and how they may align with your research interests that might help inform that long-term decision. And so whether you're entering into the professoriate, you're new to the professoriate, or you are seasoned, administrators change, priorities change, goals change. And so how well you understand what these are at this moment in time will be very important to helping inform how you proceed. And so once you have that understanding, it might be necessary to start and identify and organize a team. If you have a project in place or you have an idea, you might need other persons other than yourself to be effective in the implementation of that idea. We encourage you to identify them early and often. It's because you might grow that team, right? Those team members may shift, especially if they start to learn that their priorities are slightly different from yours. Again, that iterative process of engaging and improving, enhancing your strategy is important. Once there's a clear team, then we recommend that you start to prepare and submit in responding to these funding opportunities. We find that there is an opportunity for people, organizations, investigators to define scope before you write and as you write. If you start to write before identifying a team, you might find it difficult to find team members that can contribute to your idea. So we encourage you to identify those team members first, ideate together such that your proposal really does highlight the expertise of your entire project team. Next is, as you worked on one project, I see that the graphic is no longer there. I don't know what's happening. But the process therein is after you then start to work on submitting one proposal, we believe that one proposal is just the jumpstart for many others. And so as you develop your one proposal, please, and once you submitted it, shift your thinking to what's the next three. After we have done this, what are the other funding mechanisms that are in place that you can pursue simultaneously or before the award end date presents itself? After that, developing that long strategy, that should probably be sufficient time for you to hear back from the National Science Foundation about your award. I know it takes some time sometimes. But then, of course, think about the actual implementation once you get it. I know when I was at Virginia Union, we constantly were told, it's one thing to submit the proposal, but what are you going to do when you get the award? That level of professionalism and the skills that's necessary to effectively do that in your institutional context is hugely important. So for you senior persons that have been doing this for some time, let's mentor our newer colleagues into this process. Let's usher them in terms of understanding what are the nuances of your university such that they can implement their projects as successfully as perhaps you have. And so that project implementation may also require some evaluation. So you want to make sure that you are learning from that implementation process such that as you then move on to the next step, which is reassessing your goals, that you've now learned from the implementation of one award and you can start the process all over again. So there's this iteration of understanding your university context, organizing a team to pursue then a specific project idea, developing a plan for a long-term strategy of how you might continue to engage. Once you receive that funding, implementing that project in a way that you can evaluate and assess the impacts therein, and then reassessing those goals, because again, yours might change, your project teams might change, your institutions may change. And so as you then identify and pursue other sources, that cycle can continue.
In conclusion, we want you to make sure you take some time, maybe have a retreat with your people, and establish your goals, where you want to go. Identify a funding opportunity for each one of those goals. Develop a plan on how you're going to achieve that. So what is the deadline to submit? Is there a deadline? What is it that I need to accomplish to be able to be ready to submit? And what are the next steps that I need to? Do I need to identify collaborators? Do I need to do some changes at my institution before I can submit? I'll give you an example. Before I could submit a grant to obtain funding for some students, I had to work 5 years to make sure that I had everything set in place to make sure that when I submitted that grant, it was successful. So don't think about next year. Don't think about 2 years down the road. It might take you 3, 4, 5 years to get where you want to go, but you need to do that first step to get there.
And so the last slide that we have here, so Luisa's slide was just a summary of the beginning introduction. The last slide is just helping you stay informed with us. The HBCU-UP team, we're scattered throughout the events here today. We do have a couple team members who are virtual as well. Thank you, team, for being present. You are invited to join our listserv. We send out regular communication to our PI community or others who are members of the HBCU community. So anyone can join our listserv. You don't have to be an active PI or senior project personnel. you just have an interest in understanding the information that we're choosing to share from HBCU-UP, we invite you to do so.
And if you have any questions about the CREST centers, you can approach me. If you have questions about the HBCU Rise, Sonal, can you please get up? The solicitation is not out yet, so she cannot tell you a lot, but she can tell you that we expect it to come out before the end of the month. But not a lot is going to change, so you can read the current one as a guide to what you need to do. And Regina, if you can please get up. If you have questions about the new postdoctoral research program, please make sure to reach out to her. I think that the changes in the new program address many of the concerns that the community had, and it will facilitate the recruitment of postdocs to your centers.
And Luis is such a great leader that I feel like I should do the same thing. So Leroy Jones here is a member of the HBCU-UP team. He's going to help facilitate the question and answer component. We also have Alfred Hall here, if you could stay in, Alfred, and wave, who's part of our team. Jeremy Gwynn is a member. We also have, as I mentioned, Tori Smith, who is the session facilitator for right now, or the virtual experience facilitator. Am I missing anyone? In terms of program officers, we do have other support staff. We have an expert, Minerva Cordero, who unfortunately couldn't be here, but sends her well wishes. We have Kevin Morris, who's a AAAS fellow. So our team, we have, this work can't be done like by ourselves. It's certainly a group effort, and we certainly want to also recognize and acknowledge Tony Edquist, our program specialist. And Joyce Belcher, I'm sorry. Joyce Belcher is our newest IPA, who is also virtual and joining us. Both Tony and Joyce, they were unable to introduce themselves during our PI business meeting, but we want to acknowledge them as well. So thank you for your leadership, Luis, in helping us recognize everyone.
Great, let's give him a hand for a great presentation. So we have plenty of time for Q&A. We're going to ask that if you have a question, please line up either to my right at the mic there or to my left at the mic there. And we'll alternate between both mics. And we need for you to speak into the mic so that our virtual audience can be engaged. And we have 42 people actually virtual on today. All right, so we'll start with you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Mahmoud.
Please talk into the mic, please.
Good afternoon. My question is for the External Funding Teaching Institute. Does the PI need to be administrator? Can it be a faculty?
So each of our solicitations identifies explicitly the criteria for PI for each funding opportunity. So I'm not sure which track, at least under HBCU-UP or that of CREST.
It was on the second, one of those planning at the very beginning, where you have externally funded investigator, then externally funded research institution. So can a faculty be a PI for the externally funded research institution? Or teaching institution. Teaching.
So again, that's probably based on the track. So I can say to you for HBCU-UP, that would include targeted infusion, implementation, and ACE implementation. In short, yes, a faculty member can be a PI. However, all of those require institutional support documentation to inform your role in that capacity. But to that end, an administrator also might be appropriate for serving in those roles. So it really depends on the institutional context.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to go to the gentleman to my right. Would you please state your name and your institution?
Okay, Shanfa here from Virginia State University. So I have a question about the HBCU Rise. If I heard it correctly, it can be used to support the PhD students, is that right? HBCU Rise program?
Yes, so the HBCU Rise program and the CREST program can be used to support the students.
Okay, I was just wondering if those funds can be used to establish a new PhD program, or at the early stage of PhD program, whether we can use that fund for that purpose.
Yeah, they can also be used to establish a PhD program.
Okay, great, thank you.
Caesar Jackson, North.
By the way, there's some, like I know FAMU just established a new PhD program. Where's FAMU at? I don't see them. But the FAMU PI from CREST, they established a new PhD program using CREST funding, so you might want to talk to him. Oh, back there.
Caesar Jackson, North Carolina Central University. This is a question for CREST. As far as the research foci that are available, is STEM education research a category that's considered or would be considered in a CREST Center proposal?
We will have to look at the application because the issue is that overlaps with other NSF programs. So we cannot really compete with other NSF programs, and that's the issue. So you should target programs that their primary mission is that type of research. That way we don't overlap.
I'm Lee Xin-Zhu from Fayetteville State University, North Carolina. Oh, yeah. Lee Xin-Zhu from Fayetteville State University, North Carolina. I have two questions. One is for CREST. You talk about that CREST postdoctoral fellowship. So that means you have to have a CREST center, and then you can apply for the fellowship, correct?
So a student that completed their PhD at a minority serving institution can apply for the CREST postdoctoral program, and they will have to do their postdoc at a CREST center.
Okay, that's one question. And second question is for HBCU-UP. And Dr. Anderson just mentioned about the BPR. BPR is for research, and also excellence in research is for research. So what's the difference between those two?
This is a great question. So if I can modify your question a little bit for clarity. So in HBCU-UP, we have Research Initiation Awards and Broadening Participation Research in STEM projects. Both of these support faculty research. The Research Initiation Awards have a caveat that the PI cannot receive external funding within 3 years of their submission. That is distinctly different from HBCU Excellence in Research. HBCU Excellence in Research, for those of you who might be wondering what is this program, that used to be a part of HBCU-UP's portfolio. It is now managed in the Office of Integrative Activities, which is under a different office than our directorate. But that specifically supports HBCU faculty who are engaged in discipline-specific research. And typically, the PIs who are awarded projects under that thread have established research programs where they have already effectively demonstrated scholarly productivity within the auspices of their given work, and they don't have any budget limitations. So those are two primary differences between not just Research Initiation Awards, but also Broadening Participation Research in STEM. I know you said BPRs. BPRs do not have the caveat of being externally funded previously. Is just kind of a resource, a funding opportunity for faculty members who are engaged in broadening participation research in STEM education. That is very specific in terms of what it supports, whereas the RIA can span all STEM disciplines to support faculty. And again, it's initiating research. And there's also a misconception that the RIAs are only available to junior faculty. This is not true. Any faculty member who has not been engaged and has not received external research support in more than 3 years is eligible to submit a proposal under RIA. It's initiating that work. And so if you're just at the beginning and you don't have a lot of preliminary data to support your capacity, Research Initiation Awards might be appropriate, as well as BPR. for the HBCU excellence in research, you really need to have more established precedent for demonstrating your capacity to engage.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just want to emphasize that there's a new solicitation for the CREST PRP, it's called. So don't look up CREST PRF, that's been archived, that's being retired. Look up PRP. There are definite changes. We're trying to broaden this program by allowing additional people to apply. And please contact me if you have questions, because we really want to see more people from underrepresented groups getting these postdoctoral research awards. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you for the great presentation. So I have a question that's not related to HBCU-UP or the CREST, but it's about the instrumentation grants that are out there. Are there grants that can support instrumentation in the teaching lab? Because in the last 3 years, one thing that we have realized, at least at Hampton, that students, because of the COVID, they did not have the chance to do hands-on research. And the infrastructure over time has dwindled. So it's like, is there any small grants? We are not looking for big, something that can support the course-based undergraduate research in those labs.
I invite you and anyone else who might be interested in this type of funding to consider the equipment proposal funding opportunity under Chapter 2 of the PAPG.
Have we been able to
I'll-
answer any of the online questions yet? Oh, you got it.
We can, yeah. So, I don't know if you know about DOD funding, but if you're an HBCU or MSI, DOD has a program that can help you with that. Also look at the Department of Education. They can also help you with that. If you're that you want to get, you know, if you don't submit, you're not going to get a yes. So you have to submit. I mean, you're not always going to get a yes. But if you're an HSI, that's the HSI program. So I guess the answer to your question is it depends what institution you're coming from, and that will link you to a specific funding opportunity. I guess online?
Yeah, so we had a question online, and it's in regards to the career grant. So the first part of the question, they wanted us to kind of identify the percentage of HBCU faculty who received this award over the last 5 years. Not sure that we know that, but we wouldn't be able to give out that information. But please, Carlita and Luis, the second part of the question would be, does NSF have any plans to increase these numbers? And what are your thoughts on what current previous HBCU faculty career recipients can do to support the increase of HBCU early career faculty securing career grants?
So there will be an NSF program officer on a panel tomorrow morning specifically discussing the career funding mechanism. So I would invite this person that has offered the question to maybe present that. Margaret, I know is her first name, excuse me, as I continue to grow my knowledge base of all the names around the National Science Foundation, but she will be a panelist, and that might be appropriate in that setting. But I can say that that HBCU-UP regularly receives consideration of career proposals that come through from PIs from HBCUs, and we are committed to supporting that program.
Hi, Ashley Gilchrist, Bowie State University. My question is about the conference and workshop proposals. Can you use those to supplement dissemination in a currently funded HBCU research grant, for example? Or does it have to be a separate thing?
If you have, and I want to make sure I understand your question, if you have an active award and you're looking to disseminate. The question is, can you leverage the conference proposals to do that?
So yes, if I wanted to have, my grant is about policy, and if I wanted to have policymakers and researchers, now that I know it existed, I didn't know it existed before, could I write a grant to supplement that form of dissemination of the work for the currently funded award?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the use of the word supplement.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, I didn't mean that.
No.
I know there's a trigger right now. I know it's a trigger. Sorry.
yeah, but I don't want to go away from it though. I guess I want to offer to you that as you implement this active award that you have, as you identify your current strategy for dissemination, if you identify a need for additional resources to be effective in doing so, a supplement might be appropriate. So I don't want to dismiss that as an opportunity for you. To that end, beyond that award, if you're looking to convene space for people who are interested in engaging in this conversation, absolutely that conference and workshop proposal mechanism would be appropriate.
Just one quick note. So actually we have the NSF CREST Award, and there are like a number of new faculty who were recruited recently on our campus, and they are very excited and kind of they're working in the related areas also. So my question is, I think you kind of mentioned like if you want to kind of be inclusive of like other faculty who are not kind of were part of the like 3 projects we submitted previously. So my question is, what can be done to, or like what are the pathways for including these new faculties who are really wishing to become the part of center so that we can enlarge our kind of portfolio and also help this new faculty?
So this is when the multiple funding opportunities come into play. You got money to increase the research capacity at your institution. You got new faculty in. They're not part of the CREST Center, but they're using the facilities that you develop to the CREST Center. So, first step is getting that seed money. So you need to talk to your institution to make sure that they are, putting a little bit of money into that new faculty to get them to that next step. Then, if you said they're at a different campus, so a way to...
No, it's on the same campus.
Oh, the same campus? Okay.
Yeah, it's part of our own institution.
Okay, so if they're, at a different institution, you could go for the partnership supplement. But if they're at the same institution, then this is when the individual grants from HBCU-UP come into play. Because those faculty can go for an individual grant that is being funded by HBCU-UP, or, Dorit behind you, she has a lot of individual grants, R15s, Schuer Awards, that they can be in the same area as the CREST Center. And we welcome, faculty with any kind of money to use the CREST facilities so that the center can be useful to the whole institution.
Okay, thank you.
We have 2 more questions online, and Dr. Paige Anderson, they're directed towards you. The first one is, what program did you mention for teaching lab equipment? That's the first question. And then the second question was, could you share more about funding opportunities to hire a postdoc for PI with an HBCU-UP RIA grant?
So in the PAP-G, in Chapter 2 of the PAP-G, there are at least 10 funding mechanisms that are listed that are available for all persons at institutions of higher ed. They're open. They do not have deadlines. They're just other ways of receiving support from the National Science Foundation. One that I identified was called equipment proposals. So in the PAP-G, our NSF Policies and Procedures Guide, there is a description of what proposals to that funding mechanism requires. And so if you are looking and have a need for equipment, I encourage you to read the description in the PAP-G about what that funding mechanism requires. And if you have questions and you'd like to follow up, I invite you to send emails to myself, or I know the team will kind of walk you through that process. But we want to make abundantly clear to our PI community that there are resources available to you beyond our existing solicitation, and we would like you to take advantage of them and submit those proposals for consideration. The second question, as it pertains to the Research Initiation Awards. And HBCU-UP, as I mentioned, Research Initiation is available to faculty members who have not received external funding within 3 years of the submission date. Those faculty members can be involved in any area of STEM research that is aligned with the priorities of the National Science Foundation. So the breadth of our research priorities could be pursued by an individual. The Research Initiation Award grants can only have one senior project personnel, and that is the PI, okay? So this is a grant award that empowers that investigator to take charge of implementing their research program at their institution. In doing so, we understand that not every PI needs the same things based on where they are. So if you or your colleagues are considering pursuing and have an interest in Research Initiation Awards, it is up to you to make the case for why a postdoc is necessary under that particular project. They're not senior personnel. They can be other contributors to the project, but not identified as a senior personnel. Like I said, it could be students, graduate students and/or undergraduate students. It really depends on the type of work that you'd like to do. But I'll emphasize this, it also depends on the amount of time that you have. Research Initiation Awards, you can request release time as a component of that work, such that you have the time and latitude to really implement and fulfill the goals and objectives of that award. If mentoring students takes away your time of doing the work that's outlined in the project, I am a staunch advocate of understanding the roles of graduate students, for example, in being able to deliver and move forward at the pace that you would like to do. But I do want to acknowledge that what we find sometimes is that PIs are trying to build a team, and they're spending most of their time training and making sure that their teams are positioned to do the work, and that takes time away from actually doing the work. So while those are available through that funding mechanism, we would just strongly encourage the PI to be clear on what it is that they want to do. And if the goal is to truly establish a research program at your institution, you have to ask yourself what that means for you and your time, and if mentoring is absolutely necessary, although undergraduates are required right now in our current solicitation, so we do expect that you engage undergraduate students. But when it comes to graduate students and postdocs, these are not requirements. These are things that sometimes we like to have, and we use our time investments for recruitment and identifying these other persons. Sometimes they present as barriers to actually fulfilling the work that you've attempted to do. So I know that was beyond the question, but I felt compelled to offer some insight.
Yeah, this will be the last question.
Hi, I'm Dorit Zook. I'm from the National Institutes of General Medical Sciences, NIGMS, at NIH, and since funding for equipment came up a few times, I just wanted to let you know about a new program that NIH is developing, and it's probably going to be on the street in a few weeks, months, which is our equipment grant program specifically for minority-serving institutions. So there will be eligibility. All of you are eligible. At NIH, we have weird names and numbers. This is called an S10 program. And when I talk later today, this is a shameless plug, I'll tell you how to find out about new programs that come, how to sign up for a table of contents every week. But we are developing, we just got it cleared by our council, we are developing a program that's specifically for MSIs, specifically for equipment. So I wanted to let you know about that.
All right, well, thank you for all the questions. It is now 1:20, and we wanted to give you some of your time back as we prepare to go into the 1:30 session. If you have any further questions for our presenters, I'm sure they'll be standing up front to answer those questions. But please, let's thank them for their presentation on today.